Welcome to 30 Minute You, the university launched for you, where your co-hosts go over real-world topics through a live mentorship podcast so you can walk away with the skills you need to succeed in your field in only 30 minutes. My name is Meer, one of the co-hosts, and I host one of the world's top mentorship platforms, where I interview people like the mayor of Miami, the founder of Reebok, and the former CEO of Chipotle to provide you real-life mentorship in your pocket.
And my name is Carmen. Over the last 10 years, I've launched over 70 companies spanning in industries like hospitality, real estate, retail, and cannabis. With hundreds of employees, I am an investor, lawyer, and educator.
And we hope you enjoyed listening to this show as much as we enjoyed recording it. We'll see you inside the classroom. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to 30 Minute You. 30 Minute You is the new hot take series as part of the More We Know podcast, which is the world's mentorship platform. 30 Minute You is hosted by myself and my man Carmen right here. And today for 30 Minute You, we are talking about you just graduated college or you're in your senior year and you're figuring out what the heck am I going to do now? Where am I going to go from here? What job do I take? Am I going to go launch my own thing? What's going on? And Jeff Bezos has a very powerful quote where he says, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And so Carmen's wearing his brand right there. We're going to sort of...
Oh, shout out.
There we go.
Shout out. Shameless plugs. Sur le lac.
Coming soon, right?
It's out.
Oh, it's out.
Visit us.
So talk about it, Carmen. First job out of college, 18, 21 years old.
Sure. So I like this premise because, hopefully we're a minute into this and anybody who's not in college didn't just click out of it thinking, well, I'm already out, so this isn't as pertinent. I like this because this topic, it's for all of us to think about. It should be ever present in our minds at all times, maybe whether it's at the forefront or cataloged in the back. And I like this topic because, there is this idea that, okay, I've accepted my first job, or I graduated 2 years ago and I'm in the same job that I took out of college, and I don't know if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I think a lot of people have that conversation and inner dialogue. What I know and what I could say is when I was 18 or 20 or 22 or 25, and I imagine you could say the same thing, you didn't think about doing what you're doing today. Meaning this was not I didn't know I'd be landing here. And I don't mean literally, but that's the life journey. Less than the actual job or profession itself. So I don't think this is about accounting over life sciences or something like that. I think this is more about writing down some of the themes of your life. So I teach at the University of Illinois, second shout out. One of the exercises that I find every class is what effectively turns into a roast of my students, which is, not intended. They just feed me so much material. But what does that look like? Well, showing up to class in pajamas, not making eye contact, avoiding conversation, participation, discussion, clearly not paying attention, just on the laptop or texting, it happens.
Do you call it out when someone's texting?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm teaching or lecturing rather, and somebody then just is looking at their phone and starts to smile. It's not because of what I said. It's because of what they're reading, and they're 100% not focused on why they're there. I know why I'm there, but do you know why you're there? Do you know why you're in class? Why you showed up? So yeah, I think for today's purposes, let's talk about something we can control. And that is exactly how you started this off, your brand. Treat yourself as a brand. Let's look at it from a corporate analysis, how if you and I were in business together, how we would look at our company's brand. And then, just let it translate into personal. So you're communicating your brand with how you dress. You're communicating to the market. And really, I think that's a large chunk of what Bezos' quote is about. You're also communicating it to yourself if you have a brand mission statement. So I'm in college. I don't know if this first job is something I feel comfortable with. I'm happy I got a job. I got bills. I want to move out. I want to rent or I'm in the job. It's been 2 years. I'm doing well, but I just don't know if this job is for me. I don't know of advice in 30 minutes that could allow you to answer that question necessarily. It's super subjective. But what is the conversation you can have? Well, what's my mission statement? What's my brand? When I am out of the room using the Bezos, what do I want people to say? about me? And how can I control that? And then by identifying what my mission statement is. So for me, I want people to, I'm answering this live, but if you were to ask me, I would want people to respect my opinion. And really that's an issue of credibility. Do I have the credibility with which you would respect the opinion I gave based on, life circumstances? And to be honest with you, if that is my mission statement, then I have to know, okay, everything I do then is going to be judged against when it's my turn to talk, when I'm asked an opinion, whether I have the credibility to satisfy their interest and their intrigue. If I was always on my phone, not paying attention, if I dressed in pajamas every day, when you know about how I spend my evenings, it's 6 hours on Netflix or a streaming service every day. And then you would say, well, Carmen, what's your opinion about this startup venture? I can't imagine there'd be a ton of credibility as to, how I deliver that. And, we're not 10 minutes into this, and everybody, I got to say there's an absolute consensus of everybody saying, well, duh. So far, these aren't life-shattering thesis here. But then why aren't we having that conversation more? And I really like to isolate myself into a brand. What does my brand look like? What is the future of what my brand is to people? Like if in a job that you don't know how comfortable you feel, okay, so then ask yourself, what does your future look like? What would you want it to look like? I think money and success are a top 3. Pretty consistently, but how are you communicating that? Are you signing on for extra projects? Are you communicating that to a superior, a colleague, an associate? Are you projecting with consistency of your brand, or are you phoning it in? I mean, in which a lot of people do, and they wear it. They wear in their discomfort. Like I can see you're dressed in your lackluster and complacency. And therefore, that kind of sticks to your brand, right?
Let me ask you this: is there a difference? Like, what if because we spoke about this in one of our previous episodes, when the pajama kid who's on their phone all the time, disrespecting you. Clearly, you're there giving them your time. Have you ever had one of those where they're also really good students, like they're getting good grades on your projects and exams?
Well, of course, and I think anecdotally, we all could probably imagine situations where I get this, I don't need to pay attention because I already understand it, or or maybe the topic is not of interest to you. But what doesn't is, rare then is the person who's always on their phone or always skipping class and by the way, that's skipping class, skipping work, not showing up on time, not prepared for the meeting. How many corporate offices sort of have the Monday kickoff and 5 minutes before you're making your notes? Like there's that professional was that college student, where they're just finishing their homework, on the way to turn it in. So, and I really think that there's those sorts of habits translate and are really hard to shake, but you can, and this isn't like a self-help point of this, but you can if you just stick to the basics of identifying your brand. Yeah. Like turn the TV off, spend 5 minutes saying, what is my brand? Yeah. How do I want people to perceive that? What is my brand to my girlfriend? What is my brand to my parents? What is my brand to my different friendship circles, to my colleagues? Like what do they think? And how am I projecting that? And if life seems to be, one hit or struggle after another, sometimes I'm saying man, I'm due for a win. I just rattled off I got a 6-game losing streak going right now. I'm just getting cracked with bad news or, just unfortunate circumstances. Sometimes it's just that. It's just a streak of bad. But if you're constantly in these ruts and streaks, cancel out all the noise, isolate yourself in saying, what is my brand? What is my future? And let's pick that apart. Okay, I'm going to use the corporate analogy, so to speak, but how about what is my logo? What is my uniform? what would my website look like? I mean, not literally building it out, but when we say we would do that for a business, we would do that in a restaurant, we would do that for a sale. Apple does an Apple store is very uniform and they have their standards. Asking yourself the same thing. And if the brand, if you're not impressed with your own brand, imagine what others sort of think.
Yeah. On the topic, you mentioned the phone thing a couple times, just real quick. In now this generation, whether it's at work or, Gen Z specifically, we spend a lot of time on that iPhone and Samsung, whatever the heck you use. But do you think that almost the phone has become sort of a branch of like this addiction / like mental illness to some capacity? Like, is it dehabilitating us Gen Zs slightly?
Super cool answers to obvious questions are not obvious. So the short answer is, of course. The problem is part of our brand. I think we'll hit the 200 times that spoken word in this segment, but it's also an allocation. Like, what resources and time are you allocating your brand to? If your brand, yourself, and you're allocating your brand's time and resources to hours of social media or hours of television, like mind-numbing, sitcoms or whatever, or movies. Yeah, that's hard to say you're improving your brand like that. Like, improvement of your brand is very similar to going to the gym. I want to be more fit. I want to lose weight. I want to, shred. I'm going to do that through sitting on my phone, by watching, streaming services, by not going to the gym. It doesn't make it translates zero.
That's nothing.
So when it comes to the allocation of your brand's time and resources, that's where I think we understand how important it is to, if our goal is to lose weight, we should go to the gym. The frustrating part is we know the answer. The problem is we're not willing to do it. Like, people aren't willing to get off their phone. They're not willing to cancel a subscription because, and even though their brand is on the line, they're still unwilling to do it. The problem isn't that companies are great. Like, social media, their objective is to get you to be on it as much. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, they're killing it.
Invest in those. Like, they've checked the box. Now they're doing their job, are you doing yours? Are you improving your brand? Like, don't confuse the two. They have a job and you have a job, and they're probably not the same. And more importantly, they might not be aligned. So I think that it's super exciting that we're seeing technology infused with our brand building, podcasts like this, how-to videos on YouTube, i.e., teaching classes, the online sort of ethos. But what we're talking about is allocation of our brand resources and time that has very little to no utility. And again, what's wild is by investing so much of our time into those things, we are effectively communicating our brand to everyone else. The person who's just, distracted and uninspiring because they're constantly, down, it becomes their brand.
Yeah. Getting into the second segment of the show, we look at branding as sort of this idea of differentiation, right? Like, if you're applying to a job now, or if I'm a student in your class and I really want to get your attention and have you mentor me, we have to be able to differentiate ourselves which is through this idea of personal branding. Relate that to us for jobs, right? Like, if I'm applying, like, you go on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn right now, Carmen, and some of these companies, 843 applications. 1,800. One of them 6,000 for some of these, right? So it's like, how do I not only one differentiate myself, but two, how the heck do I decide now that I graduated, like what I'm gonna do now?
Yes. So I used to have an open mentor sort of window of time that I spent with undergrads when I was in grad school, just on resumes and job interviews.
Really?
And the issue today, which is very unlike perhaps our parents' generation, is your resume that says I attended university, I got A's and B's, I was involved in a student organization, In the summer, I was a lifeguard, and then I interned for a law firm or at a financial. That resume, everyone has that. Yeah. Everyone, literally. Like there's nothing. So now, does that say don't do any of that? No, it's just kind of like the college degree is not as powerful of a tool on paper as it perhaps may have, given that everybody's sort of. So how can I differentiate? Another proverbial example is you show up and there's 30 people sitting along the wall being interviewed one after another. Forget the 30 people. Let's talk about the interviewer. He's got to sit through, he or she's got to sit through 30 of the same. I was social chair of my sorority and I was a lifeguard, whatever so how are you going to stand out? What I would talk about is like, what's your story? You got to have it. And so like, what is your story? Success, when your story is memorable, success depends less on the number of degrees you have. It depends less on who you know, who you're related to. When your story is memorable, when you're standing out, so then, that begs the question. So how do I make my story memorable? Typically through, I like anecdotal tales of how I was able, instead of saying I interned for this finance company or clerked for this law firm, by being anecdotal about a very specific problem that you solved or that you worked on, and how you can translate. I think like, I noticed that common, everyday news of this corporate issue arises, and here was an example of when I was faced with that challenge and what I did. Making a sort of story.
The power of storytelling. And that, by the way, goes whether you're an employee or if you're a founder. Like one of the best storytellers I always like to look up to, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs used to have these decks when he was presenting the iPhones. It was so cool. So Steve was one of the guys that there would be almost nothing on his pitch deck, on the PowerPoints. It would just be the power, and he would just tell the story. It'd be a couple points. Here's the iPhone 3G. Let me tell you why it's sick. So this idea of like, I love that you resonate with the audience there about building a personal brand story. So I'm going to give you this statistic. So 70% of, according to data online, 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates during the hiring process, and 43% of employers use social media to check on current employees. And so we talk about personal branding being more important than ever. We talked about the negative side of social media, but you just mentioned that example of sitting in a room. If you're sitting in a room and there's 30 of us walking to interview for a position at one of your companies, you are probably screening them maybe potentially as an employer on social media. The ones that are going to stick out to you more than the other ones are if you see these personal brands or stuff that they're building outside, because that's going to tell you something not only about them, but they're bringing effectively their content, this content creator economy, they're bringing their social equity with them to your firm, because now you're validating them, they're validating you, they have a network, etc. What do you think of that?
Well, here's the good news. If you've spent the 5 minutes to think about your brand, an uninterrupted 5 minutes to think about your brand, and you're frustrated a little bit, the good news is you can refresh your brand. Companies do that every day. So, and how do you do it? Visually, yeah. Scrubbing social media is obvious. I think the younger generation, for millennials, there's probably a lot more tales of learning the hard way. For Gen Zs, like, you should know that. You should know to sort of scrub the socials. But instead of just using it as a liability, I don't want them to find this out. I got to take that picture. Instead of using it as a liability, it should absolutely be activated as an asset. I want them to be looking into my social media. I want them to see, these are the 10 books I read this summer. This is, here's me volunteering, here's me helping. Because if we are reallocating our resources, so let's say that you agreed with the premise of, okay, I don't want my brand's resources and time to be spent on, and we're really picking on social media, the phone, and the subscription
we love social media,
services.
by the way.
But yes. But I think it's, whatever toxic activity you're doing, okay, we acknowledge that we don't want to perpetuate toxic activity. Now you have to replace it. And what are we going to replace it with? And I think you have to understand what your brand is and what it is that you want to communicate to everybody, and then allocate your time toward that. And, I think it's a lot easier to just flip on the TV than put your coat on, going, get outside but what are we talking about? Like, I'm not saying you have to dedicate at least 10 hours a week to community services, adopting a highway, serving food. Those are all good things. But it's not only humanitarian. What about just, instead of watching this movie, instead of, my screen time on Instagram is 3 hours and 34 minutes, I'm going to cut that down by, I hope, a lot. Instead of that, I'm going to schedule a coffee with a friend. I mean, certainly you would say with somebody who, is in my career, my profession, is somebody I'm interested in. It's, I've always liked real estate, but we're picking on accountants today for some reason too, but I'm an accountant, but I really like real estate. Okay, I'm going to schedule a coffee with a broker, or I'm going to schedule a coffee with a developer. And if they answer, wow, okay. I mean, that's great. And that's a really good allocation. But now you've accomplished so much.
Yeah.
You've shed yourself of toxic activity time. Yeah. You've replaced it. You've replaced a liability with an asset by improving. You've communicated your brand to others. Wow, this person's reaching out, and their thesis is simple. I'm in a career. I'm in a job. It's maybe my first, or I'm not. I like it, but I don't know if this isn't my total brand. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yours? Because I think I might like real estate. And then by the end of it, you may say, wow, I thought I liked real estate. It turns out I don't. Thank you for telling me. I mean, so even then you've created solutions there.
Yeah. And this idea, I'll give you guys a real life example that happened actually with Carmen and myself. This was a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years ago, which, gosh, time freaking flies. But Carmen had put a posting out for, he was looking for some sort of director level position for some of his nightlife companies. And, someone that can really come in and, not only help elevate the brands, but like, you remember the director role you had put up?
No, that's why I'm
okay,
so...
Great. So he's listening. He's listening with me.
Yes, I'm wondering where we're going here.
So Carmen had put up this director position. I had DM'd him about the position, interested about it. Now, I remember, that's how him and I initially had connected, because I was like, I want to go work at Joy District and some of these clubs, and I feel like I could handle this. Carmen and I sat down for a conversation really shortly after. Like, we got on a call actually a few days later. He was telling me about all the applicants and the DMs that he got just off posting that, because he said email, I think it was Carmen at 8hospitality or something.com, whatever. And, I asked him, I was like, you have all these messages. You and I have never spoke before. Why are you now, like, I'm just curious, how are we having this conversation? You don't really know me, I don't know you. And one of the things you had mentioned is like, I've seen some of your stuff before. It was like this idea of like this personal branding. So it goes back to, you're saying all this and you have to have a differentiation. Like, this is a real life example that happened that I want the audience to really understand that you have to overemphasize what you're talking about. So, I'm a listener now, and I want to come get your attention, Carmen, like and maybe you as the hyperbole, as the example, but in general for a company, what attracts you when you're looking out for a candidate? What's going to attract you the most? What's the green light? Like, let's continue convos.
It's clear to me when people have participated in the self-exploration of defining who they are.
Okay.
And it's equally clear, if not even more obvious, when people haven't done that. And you can kind of tell. You can tell through uncertainty, body language. You could tell through. There is what I like about, one of the things I like about the breadth of industry that I'm in, the various companies, is that while there's so much diversity and diversification of, be it hospitality concepts, be it real estate, be it cannabis, be it retail, be it tech, be it startup, whatever. The one consistent, or one of the consistents, is when it comes to recruitment and people. And the thing I'm really looking for is positivity, enthusiasm, confidence. You have that because you know who you are. There's the whole fake it till you make it. It's hard to fake who you are all the time. It's a lot easier to consistently be who you are. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about with your brand. You're always, it's a It's really cool when you can elevate your brand and watch your brand grow. It's really scary when you're just dragging your brand through the mud over and over, because it's going to take that much more time to really clean it up and polish it. So, but it's got to start with like step one. And step one is know who you are, know your brand. What's your brand's mission statement? I always think about that, from what I wear to how, and it's just how I communicate. And I honestly, like, I don't conduct a lot of interviews, across the board, typically just high level. That said, I did with you because of your brand. And I just, because you DM'd, I could click, I could see what you were doing. And it was like, oh, that's interesting to me. I want to do this. If I wouldn't have seen that, I might have responded with thanks. And I'm, looping in, here's the person to talk to.
But you had a convo with me. Yeah.
But I wanted to participate in it. And just like, that's the power of storytelling. That's the power of your brand. And, and I suppose, well, I'll kick it back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, this is another segment we're going to have to just run back again, because there's so much to talk about storytelling and brand. But as we get into the closing again, I'm going to do our classic hot take, which is interviews. Tell me about a hilariously awkward interview that you had with a candidate.
Wow. It's a good one. So on interviews, like, hilariously awkward is, and this happens, but I'm surprised when people are interviewing for the wrong job. Like, I don't understand, and you'll go 40 minutes before one of us realizes that you just thought the job was very different than what it actually is. To me, the best interviews, instead of like I wish I had a hilarious one. I've had awkward. But I've had awkward. But I'd say the best ones are when the interviewer is talking the least, because they're so engaged in the interviewee. That's when and that's sort of a good checklist in your mind. Whatever conversation you're in, minus this, because I seem to be dominating the radio waves on equity of time here. But if you're talking more, it's a red flag. Excuse me. If you're talking and whatever you're saying and they're not really engaged that much, I mean,
same thing, right?
It's yes. Whereas if they are so intent, and if the interviewer has to feel like they're dragging you along, and they're doing all the talking, as an interviewee, yeah, it's panic. Whereas if you're doing the talking and they're super engaged, then it's going very well. So those are the best ones.
I love that. Well, that is 30 Minute You with Meer and Carmen. We will look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Today was storytelling, branding, getting your first job. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. We'll be back next time.